Welcome to Fuse, the AI Creative Podcast, where we explore the intersection of AI and creativity with your hosts, Rob and Jason.
All right, welcome to a brand new episode of Fuse, the AI Creative Podcast. And as you may have garnered by our intro, we are going to be talking about filmmaking with generative AI tools this week. And man, Jason, AI video has been a thing for a while. It's not exactly new, but I feel like up until this point, it's been like mostly a joke. Remember the Will Smith eating spaghetti was the big trend back in the day? But we're getting to the point where like we can actually use these tools in production, things like video, animation, SFX, voice, music, the whole nine yards. So we're going to explore that. But man, there's been a lot of news lately about just this whole space. What's going on?
Yeah. Recently, there was a film release that really took advantage of AI technology, a movie called Here by Robert Zemeckis. My understanding is it was based originally on a graphic novel, but the really interesting premise is that it's all sort of from one perspective. The camera never moves until the very last shot in the film. But much of the movie focuses on Tom Hanks and Robin Wright. And I think they use some traditional makeup, but most of the time when you see them on camera, they are either de-aged with AI or they are aged up. And somehow they had some proprietary software that on set, they could actually check what they looked like and could see in real time them aged or de-aged. So it's pretty crazy to think that now you can do films where the special effects are using AI to do what might traditionally be done by an animator.
Yeah, and that's like not the only place where it's been in the news either. I remember it was about a year ago now was when OpenAI first announced Sora, and it kind of like burst on the scene, and there's a lot of hype around it. And of course, it didn't launch until 10 months later, back in December. But at the time, like Tyler Perry, he'd been working on this huge studio project for his studio down in Atlanta, like $800 million investment or something like that. What he was thinking about adding like 12 sound stages. But then when Sora dropped, he's like, I'm going to put this on hold for a while because the industry is changing. So he even saw it a year ago. But he said being told that it can do all of these things is one thing, but actually seeing the capabilities, it was mind blowing. And so like, that's just a very early example of this technology changing the game. Around the same time, Runway, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, had started to announce that they were doing collaborations with studios to help them train generative video models. Man, what was that movie that won all the awards? It was like one of those experimental films, Everywhere All at Once. That one.
Oh, yeah.
It had, a lot of people don't know this, but one of the shots in there was completely AI generated with Runway, I believe. And then Nick Cage just this week did an interview at one of the awards shows, and he said that, like, this is an exact quote. He says, if an actor lets one AI robot manipulate his or her performance even a little bit, an inch will eventually become a mile, and all integrity, purity, and truth of art will be replaced by financial interests only. We can't let that happen. And then he also says, I say, protect yourselves from AI interfering with your authentic and honest expressions. So, man, just so many technological, creative, ethical implications around all of this stuff. It's going to be an interesting year of AI video, I believe.
Our listeners might be thinking, well, I don't work in Hollywood. I'm just a creative and I'm using these tools. What does this have to do with me? Now, maybe you and I are compelling enough that Hollywood is listening to us already. But these tools aren't just for Hollywood producers. They are for everyday people like you and me, and they're available right now for you to play with and really make some compelling content. So, Rob, let's talk about why this is timely.
Yeah, so this is the perfect time to talk about this for a couple of reasons. One, because it's been in the news, but two, I actually just entered a short film that I produced with AI tools entirely into a competition called Project Odyssey, and was excited to find out that my film got an honorable mention in the narrative category. So that was neato. When I was in college, I majored in media studies, did a lot of TV production, did a lot of film production. So short films are near and dear to my heart. And so as these new tools have come out, I actually just like from the get-go, before video models were even there, we had some hacks to take image models and produce animations out of them. And so I've been exploring AI video for the past 18 months or so. And every time a new model comes out, I try a new project. That's what Stones was, and then I had the opportunity to enter it into a competition and got some honorable mentions. So we're going to talk about the development of that particular project, but then we're also going to look at generally the tools and the creative process. It might be helpful for us to play a little clip. Obviously, if you're listening on audio, you're not going to see this, but you can jump onto our Instagram or YouTube channels and we will post the full piece, but we'll also voice over what you're about to hear and give you just a little preview of what we're talking about. So here comes the intro to my short film, Stones.
The fjord. It holds memories older than time itself. The waves write their stories on the stones, carving valleys from the earth, polishing jagged edges smooth. My father said that the stones remembered everything, every tide, every storm, every quiet morning. This cairn, it's my journal. I've spent a lifetime writing it, each stone a memory, but only a fleeting moment in the ancient story of the fjord.
And we're going to cut it off there because it's about a two and a half minute film. We're going to talk about all the tools here that went into that, but I just wanted you to kind of see like an example of what a short film that was made with AI could look like.
One of the things that I think sets that apart is that it started with a great story. It's not just interesting technology on screen, but there's a great story. And then the other thing that I see a lot that is a really quick giveaway for AI generated content is that it doesn't have that human voice in it. And the fact that you did a voiceover and then changed it using 11 Labs brings a lot of humanness to it. So we're talking about AI filmmaking. That sounds really technical. It sounds like it could be really geeky, or that you really have to understand all these technologies. What do we mean, Rob, when we say AI filmmaking? What is that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. If you've made a film, if you're a filmmaker, we're just using AI tools in the process here. So making films with particularly video, but then also we've got models that will produce the assets that we need for the entire creative process. So that includes sound effects, voiceover, music, etc. This whole space is just like blowing up recently. We try not to be a breaking news show, but if we did, like every week, we'd have something to talk about from a video standpoint. I think that too, as we're getting into this conversation, one of the things that I want to highlight as we go through is some of the objections that come up. People ask, like, is this a actual creative tool? Like, they've probably seen the Will Smith eating spaghetti nightmares or these AI created Burger King or Pizza Hut commercials that are absolutely horrific nightmares. I think we're getting to the point where, yes, these are legit creative tools. People also ask, does this cheapen the creative process? Man, the camera was seen as cheap at one point. Photoshop was seen as cheap at one point. So hopefully we'll address some of those concerns as well. And then finally, we're always going to come at these conversations, Jason, with the perspective that we're creatives first, right? We are using tools to accomplish a creative vision. We're not just typing a prompt into a model and getting back something of substance. We're the artists and we're in the driver's seat, and we're using these tools that are available to us. As we're kind of looking at different tools and different workflows and how to apply them, a straight up, I won't use this tool probably isn't a forward thinking way of looking at it. Creatives, we want to encourage you to ask, how can I use this tool in an ethical way and in a way that suits my creative style? So those are some things we're going to get into, man. But you mentioned story, and I think story plays such a big role in this underlying piece.
It really does. And as you talk about the pushback on these tools, I'm on one Facebook channel that is all just AI filmmakers and shorts and that kind of thing. And sometimes, I don't know why the trolls show up there, but they like to show up and talk about AI being slop. I think it's true to some degree that you can do sloppy AI generated content that isn't very film-like because it's devoid of any kind of real purpose or creativity or whatever. So when I think about filmmaking, I think about the fact that it all starts with story or a compelling concept. And how can we start with a foundation that is all about purpose? And even if that purpose is just doing something silly or fun, being intentional about that. So go in with a goal in mind. Like, what do you want people to experience? What story do you want them to walk away from? How do you want to affect them in some way that lasts beyond the moment? And so I said in our last episode that one of my driving principles is that you have a soul and AI doesn't. And if you bring your soul to the story that you're telling, then it can be really good. If you don't, I think what we've both experienced with AI is that it's not very poetic. It's not super artistic on its own. It's a little formulaic. But if you can bring a lot of you and your creative soul, then it can help you kind of flesh that out and do some great things with it.
Yeah, I think the criticism of a lot of AI generated stuff, I'm not going to use the word art, is that it can be slop, and we recognize it when we see it. And so that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about using AI as a creative tool to help create something that carries more meaning. Kind of a real world application of this is that, I have been iterating on the story of Stones, like back and forth, as I've tried these different models. On this one, I posted it to my personal Facebook profile, and one of my good friends, a family that I've known for 15 or 20 years now, they recently lost the father of the family, and the mom reached out and said, "Hey, like, this was really moving. Can I play this at my husband's memorial service?" And that surprised me, because
Wow.
I resonate with the story, but I didn't create it for that. I created it primarily as an experiment, but the power of story shows how people can be moved by even art or films that are created with the help of AI tools. And then we'll talk about it too, but when it comes down to story, a big part of what you'll find as you experiment with these tools is that the medium is going to shape the message in a lot of ways. You might have a creative vision that you want, like all these crazy special effects or complex actions or things like that. But within the scope of what the tools can do, that's going to be a difficult thing to accomplish, if not impossible. And so the limitations of the medium will also kind of steer the story. So that's going to be a common theme that we look at as well. So let's kind of give the listeners a brief overview of some of the models and services that are out there. And then after our break, we'll come back and we'll dig into like the nitty gritty of how we actually develop stuff with these tools. Here's the thing: as you're listening to this, new models are dropping. In my show notes, I wrote weekly, but really daily. They're getting better and better. New features are coming out all the time right now. It's a really exciting time in the world of AI video. But this is a good overview of some of the tools that are out there. So Jason, maybe start us off with some paid tools, then I'll talk about some open source tools that you can use.
Yeah. Well, the great hope for all of us that was promised last February, I think it was, and just came out in December, was Sora. And Sora is incredible and incredibly frustrating right now anyway, but you can do incredible things. In fact, the little sample that we just saw was Sora. Rob, you want to say something about your Sora usage?
The entirety of the Stones short film was made with Sora. So part of my motivation there was to kind of lock myself into the tool and do what I can within that tool. It's not the model to end all models that it was presented to be, as they never are. We saw the best of the best in the demos, but it's still very good. And there's some really intriguing tools built into the platform that help the creative process too, that we'll talk about as we get there.
Yeah. Runway Gen 3 is a tool that we both use quite a bit. It's often my number 2. Minimax, sometimes it does some really nice stuff. Kling AI is another one that I use quite extensively in my own work. We have a video model coming at some point from Adobe. And for me, it's kind of interesting because Adobe is almost like this, at least in my world, often forgotten AI tool. I am chomping at the bit to get to Google's new model VO2, which has been in private beta forever. And I've been on the list. I know you have too. I cannot wait for that.
Yeah, on the Adobe piece too, one of the benefits that Adobe has in the pipeline is that they have so much content that they have licensed to. So like the part of an advantage of Firefly as a model is that the majority of content that is trained on is licensed content. But that also means that as the video model comes out, it's going to be trained on Adobe stock video, which is encouraging to me that it will be a very high quality model.
Yeah. And then for the longest time, I would have said my favorite AI tool to generate with in the world of images is Midjourney, and they apparently have a video model coming out as well. You want to talk about some of the open source models, Rob?
Yeah, so I'm the local open source enthusiast here, and because I like to tinker, and I'm a developer at heart as well as a creative. And so there's a bunch of, if you're familiar with like Stable Diffusion in the image world, you're going to be excited about these sorts of things. We're going to do an entire episode on open source tools at some point, but at a high level, just like, you kind of go into ChatGPT and you use their LLM, or you go on to Midjourney and you use their image model, you can download and run open source image models on your own system if you have the right hardware for it. And admittedly, with video, the hardware requirement is really, really high. So this is a bit of a barrier to entry right now. But if you got like a mid-range gaming PC, particularly a PC, not necessarily Mac, you can run some of these models. So one is called Hunyuan. It's a newer video model, open source. But the cool thing about Hunyuan is that you can train the model to recognize your likeness or objects or styles or things like that. And you can generate videos of yourself, which I think you got a couple examples of, right?
Yeah, you trained a Laura, which is basically you give it a bunch of images and then you can use your name in the prompt and then it knows what you look like. So I turned myself into Indiana Jones and a Jedi and Superman and, Marty McFly, all my favorite characters. But we're going to also in the future have a whole conversation about how to do characters that are consistent. And one of the ways you can do that is by using the Laura along with Hunyuan.
Yep. And, I think you can thank me for giving you the tools, but then also for probably wasting 3 days of your time making movies of you as Indiana Jones and Star Wars. But hey, if you follow this podcast, you know that we prototype in the absurd and we try all the fun stuff for our own entertainment so that we can apply them in real world creative situations, which we do as well. A couple other open source models, Cog Video X is one that's out there. You don't need to remember all these, but we're going to get to some tools down the show notes a little bit where you can actually run these online as well, and you don't need to have the hardware for them. So you can explore them just like you do the other models. And then finally, there's one called LTX Video from Lightrix, which is a really lightweight model that if you have even lower end hardware, you can play with. The big advantage on the open source stuff is that there's a really robust community around it. And a lot of the features that you're going to end up seeing in the commercial tools are prototyped in the open source community. And so basically they're just taking open source stuff, working it to their own models. And so you can have stuff 6-12 months in advance that commercial models won't have yet. It takes some tinkering, takes the hardware, but it could be something really fun and rewarding if you're into that sort of thing. Jason, we're going to take a break right here. And then when we come back, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of what it's actually like to create stuff with these tools. So we'll be right back after the break. If you want to reach people effectively, your visuals matter. They're not just eye candy, they're tools to communicate life-changing truths about salvation and spiritual growth. Our friends at Church Visuals get that. They're here to help you craft visuals that bring the message of Jesus to life in a clear, compelling way. With a library of over 40,000 ready-to-use visuals, plus the option to edit them to fit your context, they make it simple to create impactful designs. If you need something custom, they offer unlimited custom graphics and videos at a fraction of the cost of a full-time creative hire. On top of that, they provide training resources to help you master visual storytelling for the gospel. Everything you need in one place. Take a look at churchvisuals.com.
So, Rob, the next question I think we want to tackle is how do you actually generate video with AI? What are the methods? What are the models? How do we do this thing?
Yeah, and so there's really three ways that you can generate video, and they're kind of broken down by what you're putting into the model to get the video out. First is text to video, second is image to video, and then the third is video to video. So basically, what are we putting into the model, and how is it going to come out? Text to video, exactly what it sounds like. You put in a text prompt, just like you would in a lot of image models. The text prompt is going to kind of drive the scene. But unlike prompting an image model, where you're kind of describing what's in the scene, you've got an extra dimension to worry about, and that's time. So in a video model, you would prompt not only the scene as it appears to you, but then also what should happen within the scene. Compared to using an image as an input, movement tends to be a little bit more fluid if you use the text to video piece, because you're basically drawing the visuals directly out of what the model's trained on and not giving it a starting point. And you can tend to get some longer stable generations because of that. But it also requires like really long and detailed captions. And so we've got a custom GPT that I've developed that we can link to in the show notes that will help you to write those longer prompts. You can use any LLM to enhance it, but I've made a custom GPT off of Runway's and Sora's documentation that can help you get those longer, more detailed prompts started. The second way is image to video, and that's where we take an image as an input for the model, and then basically the model will animate the image that you give it. You can also optionally add a text prompt, but a lot of times the model can figure out what you're going for just based on the image. The advantage here is that you get better control over your aesthetic and composition. Runway specifically has a tool called Frames, which is their new image model. But basically, it's an image model that's then paired with the video model to produce that starting frame. And then it will animate that starting frame from there. The downside, though, is because you're starting with like raw pixels that might not necessarily reflect like the data that the model's trained on. What can happen is that you might get less stable motion, or over the length of the generation, it will degrade over time. Figuring out which strengths and weaknesses each approach has will guide how you get there.
I use the image to video generation quite a bit. And one of their little more recent development is that you can tell the model if you want it to be the first frame or the last frame. Basically, you can set what the last frame is going to look like and it'll all generate up until that moment, or you can start with that as the first frame. And now they even have an option for you to kind of have the middle frame in some of the tools. So the controls are becoming more and more powerful, and you have more say in what happens with those video tools. There's a whole other way of generating video, which is video to video. And this allows you to do things like style transfer. So I did some experiments a while back. I was trying to get people to click on the link for my book on Facebook, and I recorded a talking head video. And just to sort of try and get their attention, I made myself into Play-Doh, an action figure, a zombie, and all of that. And it basically just takes your video and turns you into that thing that you prompt, which is pretty cool. It's still pretty early in development. It's a little quirky, but it's also pretty powerful and really can kind of help you change your medium.
Yeah, I actually just saw a piece where a guy basically made a little short film on his phone of him doing some like secret mission undercover, Mission Impossible stuff, and then used Runway's video to stylize it. And it was actually remarkably consistent. I was really impressed you could see like the before and after playing together. And I think that's going to be a really powerful tool as we go forward as well.
Well, let's talk about some specific features of these different models. I kind of talked a little bit about one in this first tool, which is Runway. We're not going to do a super deep dive, but one of the ways you can control your video with this tool is by what is called Act 1, which is where you can give it an image or a video, and you talk to the camera, and you can drive the performance of that photo or whatever with your face. And so, Rob, you had a fun little experiment that you did with this with a character from Up. Do you want to say anything about that real quick?
Yeah, so just as a quick experiment with it, I wanted to see what it would do. I got a Russell's voice from Up and threw it into a 11 Labs voice clone. Obviously, you need to have permission to use these things. This was just a fun little test. And then generated an image with Midjourney that looked kind of like Russell from Up. But then I gave Runway the image. I did a driving video with my phone of just how it should look, captured my voice as the vocal performance. So then Act 1 overlaid my driving performance onto the image to animate little Russell on the screen. And then using 11 Labs, I could take my vocal performance, overlay Russell's voice onto my vocal performance. And then again, you can see the before and after on that. And it's really compelling. It's a great tool to use for animation and things like that.
Yeah. So if you're trying to make a film and you want your character to talk, you can actually record your performance and then apply that, which is pretty cool. There's a brand new feature that just came out in Runway called Frames, and it basically is like their image generator that you can then turn into video. You don't have to drive a vocal performance with Act 1 where you act it out on camera, but if you generate the video in Runway, you can give it an audio file and it will reanimate the mouth and the lips to go along with whatever you're saying. If you saw our last episode, my book trailer actually used this particular feature, lip sync, with historical figures from the church. They now have camera controls, so you can pan, tilt, zoom, dolly out, dolly in, all of those kind of things. They have a feature now that will expand video. So if you shot something 16:9 portrait or a landscape, either one, and you want to convert it, it'll actually fill in the video above and below the frame. And it does it pretty well on many occasions. And you can also upscale your video now. Once you dial it in, you like it, you can upscale it to 4K right there in the tool. So Runway is a pretty incredible tool. You will want to have, though, the unlimited plan because it just takes many generations to get what you're after.
That's true of just about anything that we're talking about here today. Because consistency is a challenge, any plan that doesn't have unlimited generation is not going to be enough for you. Which brings up the next platform that we want to talk about, which is Sora. Sora just dropped 3 months ago, if that, no, 2 months ago. Man, it's OpenAI's video model. What I find really compelling about Sora is that it's got some creative tools in there that aren't revolutionary, but they make the production process a little easier. One of those is their storyboard tool. And what the storyboard tool is, it gives you a timeline. And then on that timeline, you can kind of like give prompts throughout the generation, and it will guide the overall motion. Now, if the model would follow the prompts, that would be great, but the model still needs some work on and development there. But as a tool, you can kind of start to see, just like the image prompt where you can give a starting or end frame or both, this gives you the opportunity to just do the same thing. And rather than try to do like one massive prompt that contains all of the specific motions that you want in it, the model will interpolate between those and you can get closer. So as that technology develops, that's going to be really cool. Another one solves a common problem that I've experienced with video models. And that's like, you get a really great take, and then halfway through, it just like goes off the rails and like morphs into something crazy. Sora's recut tool lets you cut out the bad piece and then just regenerate from where the good part left off. So that way, like, you don't have to ruin a take. If you get like something that's halfway there, you can regenerate it and get it closer to what you're looking for. So that's what I did a lot in the Stones piece. A third one is a video to video feature called Remix. And basically, just like all the other video to video, you can give it a driving video, tell it what you want to change about it. And so you can change like an element of the scene, or you can change the entire style of the scene or things like that, just with a text prompt. And it works pretty well. Some of the demos are really neat. Again, these are features that are in development and might not be ready for prime time, but if you are willing to tinker and play, they can be really fun, creative tools. So, I think that what you're going to find is that video models, again, they're all pretty much the same. It's going to be the features that are built into platform that really drive how you use them in a creative context, which brings us to the next one, Jason, that you've experimented with, which is Kling, and it has some interesting platform features as well.
Yes, I really like Kling. I find that when Runway doesn't do the job for me, Kling often will. And I'll say I was on Sora for the professional plan. And what I found is that oftentimes it would restrict what I could do. I was always coming up against their license. One of the things I like about Kling is that they tend to be pretty open and let you do just about anything that you'd like. Feature-wise, they just added a brand new feature that is pretty cool called Elements that will let you take images of different things that you'd like to incorporate into your video. So my very first experiment was taking my photo, your photo, a sombrero, and a roller coaster, and saying, two men wearing sombreros riding a roller coaster. You can find this video over on our Instagram page, but it's pretty incredible what it can do. And the likenesses stayed pretty consistent and so on. We looked like we were having a pretty good time on that roller coaster.
That Elements feature is like the best of both worlds of text to video, to where you can kind of control the scene and have a little bit more consistency, but then also like being able to put in those individual pieces is wild. So that's going to be something to look out for and watch.
They also have a lip sync feature, but what I like about their lip sync feature is that you don't have to generate the video in Kling. So Runway will not allow you to upload a clip and change the mouth through lip sync. But with Kling, I can upload any video, which means that if I generate it in another platform and I get exactly what I want, Like, for instance, I did something with a puppet and I brought it into there and I got the puppet to look the way I wanted, but I was able to change the mouth shapes and stuff in Kling. So that's a pretty cool thing. And then it also will let you do sort of the equivalent of a Lara where you can train your likeness into the model and then prompt it with text. So I can have Kling learn my likeness, and then I can text Jason riding a roller coaster, and I don't need pictures to drive that, but it then knows my likeness and can animate that. So pretty powerful tool, and it's only going to get better.
Yeah, I am really excited about how all of those things are going to develop. It seems like the Chinese models, Kling, Minimax, they are developing much faster. Whereas, I think that part of the challenges of the bigger players stateside, like Runway and Sora, are that there's a lot more scrutiny around like AI safety and things like that. And so, like Sora deliberately has to kind of lock down features a little bit to make sure that they're not running aground of any criticism on copyright infringement and things like that, or deep fakes. Like, in order to even do an image to video with a person in it, you have to have the pro account. So those are some definite limitations that I see some of the other overseas models developing faster on, for better or worse. Also, in the world of video and filmmaking, it's not the 1920s anymore. We don't have to have silent films. And so we've got technology to help out with that too. And so if you kind of harken back to the Stones demo that you saw, there's a bunch of tools that we have available to create all the audio that you're going to need in the filmmaking process. And it's going to be sound effects, voice, and music. So on the sound effects side, man, I think we talked about this in our tools episode. 11 Labs is hands down the best sound effects generator available now. Basically, 11 Labs, you go in, you type whatever you want, and then you'll get some workable sound effects. It's not like, a Foley artist recording it and it's perfectly, 24-bit, cinema grade audio, but it's good enough for most small scale creative projects. And I use it frequently in the stuff that I do. And an interesting development that's been kind of coming through the open source pipeline and making its way into commercial models is automated Foley, which, the Foley is the generation of the sound effects synced up with the video. And so basically you can upload a video, the model will take a look at the video and then sync up the sound effects that are happening in the video with the video. So it's not just arbitrary. It's like, all right, you see a horse walking along the ground, you hear clip, clop as its feet hit the ground. So that's going to be something really interesting in the process as well. What about voiceover, man? You and I, we love us some 11 Labs. How does that fit into the process?
Yeah. So voiceover is incredible. And it's so believable now that, you could legitimately fool people with it. Not that that's the primary purpose. In fact, let's hope that that's not what we're doing with it. It used to be that you had text to speech. So I could type out my script. I would hope that the AI could capture it, but oftentimes the inflection would be wrong or just wasn't the right emotion and that kind of thing. Now you have the ability to do speech to speech. So I can read it with emotion and I can get loud and quiet and sad and happy and all of that. And then I can apply the voice after the fact, which is what you did on your Stones piece. And I think the piece benefits greatly from having a human driving the performance. The nice thing then is that with tools like Act One, when you give the vocal performance, you can then take that audio that you have captured when you're doing the driving video and change it with 11 Labs and then marry that up with the lip sync that you have done with Act One. So it means that we can now have our characters talking and we can actually see what they're saying and so on. And
one warning there is that as you're doing that process, so this is something I learned in the Stones experience, the order in which you do it is important. And so like if you're going to use the facial performance to drive the video and then have it synced up with the audio, you're going to want to do your facial performance first. If you do the vocal performance and then try to overlay it, you're going to get sync issues because you're going to have to go back and redo the facial performance. So doing those both in one pass is going to be helpful. You mentioned this, how just getting inflection and things like that is difficult. I probably generated some clips for Stones 10, 15, 20 times, and I just could not find a voice that had the cadence And the only way I could get that done was with speech to speech. So that is a really powerful tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I used that for the trailer that we showed in the last video, and there were a couple of them that I had to do that. St. Francis of Assisi that had Italian accent. I just couldn't get it to work. So I had to just do voice and let that drive it. Well, let's talk about music generation as well, because that's improving. But our go-to tools, some of our favorites are Suno, Udio. These tools will even split the track up into stems so that you have the ability to kind of control what you create. So if you want to separate out the vocals from the drums and the guitar and so on and so forth and do your own mix, you can do that, which is pretty awesome. You also have the ability to upload a sample. You can sing something, you can play chords, you can do whatever, and then extend that track and create custom material from it. So we're really at the place where you're going to be able to generate just about every aspect of what you would want, from sound effects to video, or video, sound effects, music, and dialogue. All of those things. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I've been using Suno like crazy for cinematic background music. It's crazy. The intro music to this podcast, our theme music, was created with the help of Suno. It took a lot of manual work, but it's game time ready, I think, for a lot of things. I think it's important to note as you go into this process that, like all AI tools, there's a big element of randomness in there. It's not a magic bullet, but things are moving toward being more consistently reliable tools. Any serious work that you're going to do requires an unlimited plan. So, for the example, the Stones short film had 39 clips, I think, in the entire 2.5 minute runtime. It took 1,060 clips to be generated to get those 39 clips. And so, I worked it out. The plus plan on Sora gives you 1,000 credits. Stones would have taken 180,000 credits to create. So get the pro plan, or get the unlimited plan with whatever generator that you want in order to do serious work. But here's a question, Jason. Like, you and I both have some buyer's remorse on video models. How do you figure out which one you want to use and where you might want to invest?
Well, the good news is there are ways that you can get around having to subscribe to a bunch of services and pay for and be locked into just one service. There are some sort of aggregators that have a bunch of different models built in, and you can kind of pay for different plans and pay as you go. I use a website called Krea, Krea. And what I like about Krea is that it has image generators built in, but also video models. And it's got most of the models that we've talked about, and it just charges you the credits that are coming out of your account for that month. And you can set up different plans and so on. We both have used FAL.ai. It has a bunch of generators built in. And again, you're charged per video that you create. And it's only, a few cents per video or image or whatever. Now, these apps aren't quite as fancy. They don't have all of the dials and knobs and all of the things that you can go really detailed into settings in the same way, but they are a great way for you to kind of experiment and say, hey, I really like what I get out of Kling. So maybe the next time I'm going to buy an account, I'm going to go with Kling because it seems to give me the best results. But anyway, this is sort of like a buffet. You can go and choose a little bit of this one and a little bit of that one and try everything and then figure out what you really like before you commit to one of the models.
Yeah, I look at it in the same way as some of the LLM aggregators too, to where you can get one subscription and use all the different models. It's like you're getting to try the models, but you're losing the ecosystem that's built around the model. And when it comes down to like serious work, at that point, you're going to want to have kind of buy into an ecosystem. But if you're just exploring, then the pay-as-you-go options are really, really compelling. You don't need to drop $100 a month to get one tool. You can generate for 50 cents a video or less. And then ultimately, like all these tools, they are tools. They're part of the creative process. And so we'll see more and more AI assisted tools, AI generative tools being worked into your everyday workflow. So you see that in like things like Photoshop, where you've got generative fill. Premiere has now generative extend, to where you can extend a video clip if you need a couple extra seconds. Adobe has a whole suite of stuff in the pipeline for things like storyboarding and whatnot. Runway collaborating with studios to produce customized models. Like this this isn't going anywhere. And so if you are active in the space, you're going to want to keep an eye out for what's going on and at least be educated, if not embrace the tools as we go as well. End of the day, man, we are like 75% of the way there to being able to create a film with 100% generated assets. You're going to still need human editing, human grading. You're going to need to have the story locked down ahead of time. There's going to be a lot of roll the dice and work that you need to do to get what you want out of the model. But man, I would encourage anybody listening, if you are in this space or tangential to this space, give it a try. Use it as a tool, generate some B-roll for a project, use some of the tools like, video to video to maybe make some enhancements. Check out Runway's generative VFX tutorials. And then if you're already like really dedicated, I would encourage you to just try to make a full piece from AI generated assets alone, because that will really challenge you to see where these things fit in a creative process. And then when you go back to a more traditional project, you'll be able to like, all right, this is a solution for that particular thing that I could do before.
Absolutely. I love the whole idea of challenging people to create something with all the tools from start to finish. You'll learn incredible things along the way. Well, that's pretty much what we have for you this week. Join us next time when we talk about some exciting developments that are going to happen in the world of copyright and AI. It's going to be a great conversation.
Thanks for tuning in to Fuse, the AI Creative Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, it would mean a lot to us if you'd smash that subscribe button, leave a review, and share this episode with a friend. If you'd like to connect with us or follow along with projects we're working on, find us on Instagram at AI Creative Podcast or at aicreativepodcast.com.